5.4 half-angle formulas. So here's the first formula for sine angle A over 2, plus minus. Plus minus tells you that you need to check the quadrant. If the quadrant is positive, then you would choose a plus, and if the sine value is negative, then you would obviously choose a negative value. Sine, same thing for cosine. So here's our first example. So first thing we should do, they tell you where the angle A resides. It resides in quadrant 3, between 270 and 360. I'm sorry, quadrant 4. So let's draw a triangle in quadrant 4. Whoops. All right, so here's a triangle in quadrant 4. And we're calling the angle A. All right, so let's see here. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so adjacent is 3. Hypotenuse is 5. This is a 3, 4, 5 triangle, but this has to be negative because we're in the 4th quadrant. All right, and now let's write the formula out. So the formula for cosine of A, for sine of A, we're only going to do one of these. Let's just do the first one, sine of A over 2. So sine of A over 2 would be this one, plus or minus 1 minus cosine A over 2. All right, so let's go ahead and figure this out. So let's see, cosine of A. Okay, so cosine of alpha would be adjacent. Oh, well, we already know what the value is. It's 3/5. So this is going to be either positive or negative. Sine, we know sine is negative in quadrant 4. All right, so that's going to be a minus. So we have 1 minus 3/5 over 2. All right, and then we just simplify the inside of that fraction. We can write that as 5 over 5. 5 over 5. So that's going to be 2/5 over 2, which is 2 over 10, which is radical 2 over radical. Well, actually, it's just 1/5. If we simplify, minus the square root of 1/5, which is 1 over radical 5. We rationalize the denominator, and that should do it. That should be our answer right there. All right, let's look at the second example. Or they give us a tangent formula for half angle for tangent. All right, they want us to graph a y equals 4 cosine squared x over 2. All right, so let's take the formula for this. The cosine half angle formula is plus minus 1 plus cosine of x over 2. So when you square both sides of this equation, you're going to get cosine squared x over 2. The plus or minus just becomes positive. The square root cancels. So you're going to end up with 1 over cosine of x over 2. But you have a 4 here, so we have to multiply both sides of this equation by 4. And that becomes 2. So when you distribute the 2, you're going to get 2 plus or minus 2 cosine of x. All right, so we already know what cosine looks like. Cosine would be, we got 0, 2 pi, pi over 2, 3 halves pi. The amplitude is 2. However, we're going to raise this 2 units because of the vertical shift. So now we're going to go all the way up to 4. And so 4 would be where you start. And then you're going to go down. And you're going to go down to 2 would be your low point. So there we go. That's one complete cycle for this graph. this graph became this. All right, let's take a look at the homework now. So we'll start with number 5. Number 5 tells us they want us to find cosine of 15 degrees. Let's use the half angle formula. Let's let x equal 30. Then we have cosine of x over 2, which is cosine of 30 over 2. And then we can go ahead and apply this. So this is going to be, remember the formula is plus minus 1 plus cosine of x over 2. All right, x is 30 in this case. So if we plug in 30 here, we're going to get, all right, cosine of 15, that's in the quadrant number 1. And cosine is positive in quadrant number 1. So we're going to use a positive. We get 1 plus cosine of 30 over 2. Cosine of 30 degrees is radical 3 over 2. So we got, I'm going to call 1 2 over 2 plus radical 3 over 2 over 2. I just changed 1 to be 2 over 2, which is the same thing. The cosine of 30 degrees is radical 3 over 2. And now we have a common denominator. So I'm going to work upward. So this is going to become 2 plus radical 3 over 4 if you simplify. And then the square root of 4 becomes a 2. So you're going to end up with 2 plus or minus radical 3 over 2. And you can also write this denominator of 2 as a coefficient of 1/2 instead, if you prefer that notation. Either one is fine. Let's see how they write it. They wrote it the way I wrote it. So this would be your final answer right there. Let's look at this one. Same thing, half angle formula. We're going to let x be 150. Basically what you want to do is just double that. If you multiply it by 2, you get 150, and that becomes your x. And we know that sine of x over 2 is equal to plus minus 1 minus cosine of x over 2. So that means x is 150. So if we substitute 150 for x, we're going to get, let's see, 75. That's in quadrant 1. Sine is positive in quadrant 1. So we're going to go with the positive, not the negative. So this is going to be 1 minus, the cosine of 150 is, let's see, that would be negative radical 3 over 2. So you're going to get a double negative here. And once again, I'm going to change this to be 2 over 2 again. And double negatives become positives. And same thing as before, you're going to have 2 plus radical 3 over 2 divided by 2. That becomes a 4. And then the square root of all that. And then the 4 becomes 2. So 2 plus or minus radical 3 over 2. It's actually the same answer as the previous problem. All right, cosine of 105. So 105 is not on our unit circle, but if you double it, you get 210, and 210 is on the unit circle. So we're going to double that, just like we did last time. So x is going to be 210 degrees. So cosine of 210 divided by 2 is plus minus 1 plus cosine of 210 over 2. I'm going to erase this to create some space. All right, cosine of 105, that would be in quadrant number 2. Cosine is negative. So this time we're going to use the negative because cosine of 105 is negative in quadrant 2. So negative. All right, cosine of 210, that would be, cosine of 210 is negative radical 3 over 2. Negative radical 3 over 2. Once again, I'm going to change the 1 to be 2 over 2. And same as before, we're going to end up with a negative radical 2 minus radical 3 over 4, but the square root of 4 becomes 2. So this should be our final answer here. And basically that's the same thing. They just wrote it with the 1/2 coefficient. All right, for the last problem, let's see, we have to draw another triangle in quadrant 4 again. All right, this time they tell us that sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so that's opposite over hypotenuse. And if you do the Pythagorean theorem, you should get 4 minus 1, which is 3 radical 3. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. A squared plus b squared. If you square that, you get 3. 3 plus, oh wait, did I do that wrong? That's 9 minus 1. Sorry, that's wrong. So 9 minus 1 is 8. Square root of 8 is radical 8. So I'm just going to call that 2 radical 2. So if you do the Pythagorean theorem, you should get 2 radical 2. Yeah. All right, and so now we can go ahead and find this. And let's look at the value here. So this is our b. All right, and let's see. Oh, they tell us that it's in quadrant 3, actually. Whoops, I drew it in the wrong quadrant. They told us that it's in quadrant 3. Why did I put quadrant 4? Oh, because I saw this. All right, so let's redraw the triangle because I drew it in the wrong spot. All right, opposite over hypotenuse. This is still 2 radical 2, but it's negative because it's in quadrant 3. So now we can find out what this is. This is going to be plus minus 1 plus cosine of b over 2. All right, and let's see what we get here. Okay, so let's see here. We're looking for this. So cosine of b would be, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that's negative 2 radical 2. So that's going to be, let's see, negative radical 2. So that's going to be 2 over 2 minus 2 radical 2. Double negative becomes a, oh no, that's just a single negative, over 2. All right, and now we have this expression. Okay, so now we have to simplify the top. I should have said 3 over 3 instead of 2 over 2. So this is 3 over 3. So we're going to end up with square root of 3 minus 2 radical 2 over 6. Okay, and so now this is going to become radical 3 minus 2 over radical 2 over radical 6. I don't think they need it. They want us to rationalize the denominator. If they do, we just multiply top and bottom by radical 6. So then this would be 6 in the denominator. And then if you multiply by 6 the inside, you're going to get 18 minus 12 radical 2. So that should do it right there. Okay, so they left it in this form. So we could have just left it in this form. We didn't have to go the extra mile over here. And actually, we forgot to consider whether it was positive or negative. And let's see. Cosine is negative because b over 2 is in quadrant. Must be in quadrant 3. They're telling us it's in quadrant 3. So therefore, cosine is negative in quadrant 3, so it should be negative.